up.
Isn't it clear then?
What do you say?
Isn't it clear that Pan Am?
Oh, yes.
The die is cast. With every second, the KLM is going faster and faster. At the same moment, the Pan Am reaches the number 4 exit and begins to turn off the runway.
God damn, that son of a bitch is coming straight at us!
When he hit us, I didn't think he'd done us that much damage because the airplane very quickly shuddered.
The first thing was this huge, loud noise, and the only thing I could liken it to is if each molecule of air exploded. That's the way I thought of it afterwards. It just was so loud.
At first, I thought they had gotten to us with a bomb, and it came up and slammed down. The lights went out, and flames came through. I had put my hands over my face and said, Lord, today I'll see you.
The minute I opened my eyes, I looked in the cabin and everything was on fire.
All the windows were going in the cockpit. I looked out to the right wing was on fire. I looked back to the left. We had 28 people in the upstairs lounge. The lounge was no longer on the airplane. It was just a big hole there. And I could see all the way to the tail of the airplane, just like someone had taken a big knife and cut the top off.
People were just sitting in their seats. They weren't moving. I don't know why.
Yeah, in normal circumstances, you're supposed to wait for a command, but it was clear you didn't need to wait for a command in this situation.
There was fire, and I shouted to Suzanne, fire on the wing.
She ran back to my exit
and saw Suzanne standing there, getting ready to open the door, and just saw the door crumple like cheap tinfoil. And I thought, oh my God, we're trapped.
I was staring at the door, and I yelled, unfasten your seatbelts, remove your shoes, leave everything, come this way. And as I stared at the door, a jagged hole seemed to open up in the roof over the door.
And the next thing I knew, I was outside that. I don't know how I got out there.
Joan was standing there yelling, Suzanne, take my hand.
And I was standing above the level of the door on fuselage rubble pieces. And I leaned down and said to Suzanne, give me your hand.
She grabbed me out with one hand. I mean, I don't know how she lifted me.
And then we were standing up on top of almost on top of this airplane. And I thought, it's really a long ways down. If we jump, we're gonna break our legs.
We were on debris. It was like ice flows, big chunks of fuselage kind of moving all around.
The engines were starting to disintegrate already. We could hear them disintegrating and throwing metal.
I lost Joan's hand very quickly, so I jumped. And it seemed like the leap from a second-story building.
The captain, he elected to jump down in the first-class section of the airplane. And when he hit the first-class floor, the floor collapsed and he fell on down into the cargo area. It was so hot that the oxygen bottles exploded and burned him very badly, as a matter of fact.
It was a survival mode that kicked in, and it was just get out of that airplane. I didn't stop to think about how it happened.
I went to where the door would have been, and I left my wife seated. And then it came to me, what am I doing? Where's my wife? So I turned around, and she was coming, and I said, I will jump and try and break your fall.
My husband was sitting to my right, and I undid his seatbelt and kind of pushed him out of his seat to get him moving. And we headed for the door that was closest to us. And it was engulfed in flames, and there was no way to exit that way. I looked over, and at some point, someone had opened the other door, which was amazing to me. And I just yelled over here and headed toward the door on the other side, which was, again, the wing door.
In the haste to get out of the burning plane, Karen became separated from her husband. He died in the flames.
I immediately thought it was total destruction. It never dawned on me that I would make it. But I thought, hey, you know, do something. Don't just sit there, do something. I just went over the seat backs, and I'm not that athletic really, but I went over 3 rows of seats. One man was sitting there looking like I need help, but I couldn't help him.
When KLM hit us, all communication stopped. The tower called and couldn't get any response from either the KLM or ourselves. There was an airplane in the holding pattern right above Tenerife. Called the tower and said, I see smoke and wreckage on your runway.
Rodeos approach Sterling 105. We're downwind from runway 30 and something's glowing on the field. Looks like a fire. Are you aware of any fire?
Shit, this can't be true! Come on, come on! Come on, come on!
He hits the emergency warning. After KLM hit us, he went on down the runway and hit on the runway 1,500 feet down, closer to the tower. So when the fire truck and the ambulance came out, they got to him first. So no one came to us for quite a while. As a matter of fact, I remember thinking, I wonder why somebody hasn't gotten out here to help us.
It's complete bedlam. In the fog, the fire trucks don't know where to go. When they eventually find the Dutch plane, it's hopeless. Everyone's dead. And the whole time, they don't realize there's a second plane a short distance away, hidden in the mist, with people waiting to be saved. It's another 20 minutes before the Pan Am plane is discovered. Only 20% of the Pan Am passengers get out alive, and most of them are gathered on the left wing, which has somehow miraculously remained intact.
The entire left wing of the airplane was covered with passengers. And it turned out there were probably 45 to 50 passengers out on that wing.
I've never asked anybody how high the wing is from the ground on a 747, but it looks to be a very long ways.
And I cut open my head and fractured my foot. My wife jumped after me, and she said, I cannot walk. And I dragged her on her side for probably a block and a half away from the plane.
The motors were going full tilt, and I didn't want to get over where the motors were, so I sat down by the body of the plane. I had no comprehension at that moment that I would be jumping off the wing and
In the debris, you knew there were trapped passengers and people, and there was absolutely nothing you could do to help because the airplane was collapsing in on people.
Only one door was opened by a crew member, and that was one of the black flight attendants who did that. And she lost her life when the engine disintegrated and debris hit her. And I thought if we could just walk around to the other side of the plane, we would find all of the passengers and our other fellow crew members, which of course wasn't the case.
Even 20 minutes after the disaster, the controllers in the tower still have no idea how serious things are.
Departing aircraft. All departures are suspended until advised. Hello. My God.
I'll get local fire out of here. Notify the ambulance. We have an emergency. We need every vehicle they've got.
We're done. It's can't be our fault. I mean, I told him to clear the taxiway.
When I got out on the ground, I could hear people screaming and yelling and all. Within about 5 minutes, you heard absolutely nothing. There was no noise at all, just the airplane burning. I asked one of our medical directors later on what he calls that, and he said that when you have a fire that hot and that much of a fire, it consumes all of the oxygen in there and people basically suffocate.
I felt so responsible because I couldn't take care of my passengers, and so helpless in looking back and knowing that there's nothing you can do. You can't get back in the aircraft. There's no way to get in it, and it's all on fire.
Of the KLM plane, very little remains. It had continued flying for another 400 meters before slamming into the ground. The 55 tons of fuel it had taken on ensured that everyone on board died in the fiery explosion.
It was personal vehicles, cars and trucks that seemed to come onto the grass and gather up people.
About 75% of our surviving passengers got to the hospital in taxicabs.
It was a wild, crazy ride as we were going to the hospital. The skin was hanging on both hands because I had received burns, but it hadn't affected my eyes.
I had blood all over me, and I walked up to somebody and said, "I'm a doctor, can I help?" And the guy that I said it to had the oddest look on his face, just this very wan smile, and he just shook his head, and then I immediately went into a coma.
Word soon gets out, and in the hours that follow, the international press begin to arrive, and the first news is flashed around the world.
Rescue workers are still going through the wreckage of the 2 jetliners this morning in the Canary Islands. They're looking for the bodies of victims in this worst accident in aviation history. 2 jumbo jetliners, 747s, collided on the ground at the airport at Santa Cruz de Tenerife yesterday morning.
One was a Pan Am charter from Los Angeles that picked up more people in New York before flying to the Canaries. The other was a KLM charter from Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
They set up a morgue in one of the hangars, and it was huge, and they had all of the nearly 600 bodies in that particular hangar, or temporary morgue.
The death toll rises to 583 people, nearly twice as big as any previous accident. And then everyone begins asking the same questions. How and why could 2 state-of-the-art airliners smash into each other on the same runway? Very soon, a whole army of investigators begins arriving from the 3 countries involved, Spain, Holland, and the United States. Under the rules that govern this sort of thing, they all have a right to be there, but that doesn't mean they're going to get along. In Spain, the military still runs everything, including aviation. When the American team from the National Transportation Safety Board arrives, the Spanish general in charge won't even let them into the room.
I sneaked in, and I went to the general and told him, "The general, my name is Luis Carmona. I represent the U.S.